You are listening to the enhanced version of the Jeff Rubin Show. The enhanced version comes with pictures. So, as a friendly reminder, when you hear this noise, take a look at whatever you are using to listen to the show, because there is a picture I want to show you to visually demonstrate what we are talking about. It's not always going to be boxing kangaroos, it's just boxing kangaroos for this example. And now, without further ado, the highly anticipated Downton Abbey episode of the Jeff Rubin Show, starting now. Welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. I am Jeff Rubin, and today I am joined by college humor's Streeter Seidel. Welcome to the show, Streeter.
I wish you'd call me your friend instead of just where I'm not your coworker, your friend of 7 years. Just my credit.
Just, you know, he's from College Humor, MTV's Pranks.
Yeah, I mean, you could have picked a few things.
Shows all around the country. I had a poll on Facebook at one point for who people wanted to see on the show. And I'm always open to suggestions, but one week I was like, I really wanted to collect a lot of names. I had a poll on Facebook. You were at the top of the list. People really wanted to hear you on the show. Unfortunately, I also didn't ask them what they wanted to hear you talk about. So today we are going to be covering Downton motherfucking Abbey.
I'm sure that's what, when people voted in the poll, I'm sure that was implied that that's what I would talk about, Downton Abbey.
So, Downton Abbey, we're going to kind of approach this the same way we did the Game of Thrones one with Gabrus, which I'm sure everyone really remembers.
Streeter Plus, as I call Gabrus.
So, we're going to try to talk about the show generally and how the show got popular and what kind of show it is, so that anyone can enjoy it for the first half of the show. And then we'll spend the second half of the show getting into the details of the plot and
the spoiler part of the show.
So, and we'll give you a clear warning before then. So you could theoretically enjoy the first half of the show, even if you've never seen Downton Abbey. We haven't recorded it yet. I can't promise anything at this point.
What I've come prepared to do is like a lot of quips, like witty quips, and like kind of maybe like make fun of you a little bit because, you know, that's just our dynamic.
Let's just see where it goes. Where it goes. So, Downton Abbey, kind of an unusual topic for this show, kind of an unusual show to become popular, to become as popular as it has.
Yeah, very unusual show to get popular.
First of all, if you don't know anything about it, how would you describe Downton Abbey?
I believe it is, this is apparently a genre in England. I don't know that it's so much here, but an upstairs, downstairs drama.
I'm like catching up here, you know. I know a lot about X-Men comics, but upstairs, downstairs. Which a specific show, and I think it's also been done so many times that it's considered a format now.
Yeah, genre format, I guess.
But there was a show called Downstairs, Upstairs too.
All I knew from upstairs, downstairs when I heard that being talked about was the name of the game show that David Brent had sketched out in The Office.
This is not that. Another thing about the show, Streeter, you should know is you should feel very comfortable making grandiose statements that you aren't even sure about.
That's perfect because, you know, I'm no expert on the show.
Right. So after the show, I like to fact check it and then like in the outro, like throw in everything we got wrong, like all the things we weren't sure about. That's my new thing.
Why don't you, since you do the enhanced version, why don't this time instead of a picture, how about the noises for every time I say something that's incorrect?
Oh, that's
the noise will pop up.
We'll see. I mean, I don't expect you're going to say that much incorrect, but it is kind of like we're already in like, I think it's a show, maybe it's a format. Clearly neither of us really know what we're talking about here. But that's what's so interesting because it's this period British drama. I hate period pieces as a rule. Like I generally don't like fiction that takes place before 1920 or 1930.
You don't like
or
anything that's real, that involves something that happened in real life. Like you're only interested in imaginary lands like Catan.
I like to throw a little fiction. Well, Catan, first of all, Catan is based on Norway, I believe.
I knew we were going to get into this Catan chat.
So, what were we talking about? Oh, so the show it's a British period piece, which I wouldn't usually like, but so many people were talking about it. But it's a certain type of person that was talking about it. Because I was talking to my friend Adam, who comes up a lot on this show, and we were all like, "Oh, you watched Downton Abbey?" We were talking about it. He's like, "What the hell are you people talking about?" And I was like, "Everyone's talking about this show." And Adam, who is a physician's assistant, is just like, I've never heard these words before in your life. So there were a certain type of person was talking a lot about the show.
I heard about it because I feel like it made its way through the comedy world
A little
for
bit.
some reason. Like a lot of comedy writers and comedians were talking about it and watching it. And I don't understand why. I mean, I watched it and really, really enjoyed it. But I don't know what about the show appeals so much to comedians other than I love, like, crazy, outdated British tradition.
Well, I think more than comedians, the comedians that you and I know, I think are also into really good television, not just really good comedy.
That's
They're just
true,
like into high caliber TV. Like at The Office, we're all into Breaking Bad. We were all into Lost, The Wire. Like, we're all into dramas as well as comedies. And I think that a lot of people who love good TV and like discovering new TV and finding the newest, best show, they were talking about it to a degree.
It's a completely weird show. Like, it sounds so boring. The plot is basically, it's a family, the Crawleys, and they're like the landed gentry. So they live in this massive house that is called Downton Abbey, and there's a village that kind of comes with it, Yeah, exactly. It's totally
so boring.
And there's like there's some intrigue and some drama with the heir. The original heir dies in the Titanic sinking, and so this kind of working class guy, a lawyer, so a white collar worker, but still.
To them, he's working.
Yeah, to them, they're like a job. I believe at one point someone does go, but he has a job.
This show looks like, how like a lot of kids' TV shows, they'll use Brussels sprouts as just to like invoke like the grossest like thing you don't want to. I feel like this is like a kids' TV show would show this as an example of the most boring thing a kid could possibly see. It's just stuffed up, fancy-looking British people be arguing about their the inheritance and the wealth and what's to be done.
But that's only half the dynamic,
right?
Because that's the upstairs dynamic. Downstairs, we're seeing the drama with the staff unfold. The cooks and the butlers and maids and footmen and valets. So we see how they interact with the family, and they have their own thing going on. And you know what it feels like? If it gets popular enough, like you said, Brussels sprouts, I could see it as like a Family Guy cutaway joke.
Oh, definitely.
Where it's just like the most boring. And they're like, Peter's like, oh, let's watch Downton Abbey. And then it's just like, bleh,
well, Community did a thing with, they did like a Downton Abbey parody. Kind of right before everyone got into it, they had a show. What was it? They watched like Abed. They watched all of them in a day. I can't remember what it was called.
I didn't see that one.
It exists. I'll let you know.
I'm not surprised.
And they did that a little bit before everyone was watching the show here, before I had watched it anyway, which means they had taped that and written it even months before that, talking about comedians and people that appreciate.
So what you're saying is that the staff of Community was illegally watching Downton Abbey at some point.
Well, that's kind of the other interesting element of Downton Abbey is that the first season. So it's only really, I mean, it seems like it's really hitting now. I don't have any statistics to prove that, but just based on people I know talking about it a lot and you hearing us talk about it, it seems like it's only hitting now. Season 1 is on Netflix. I think it's on Amazon, which you have Amazon Prime. It's like for free on Amazon Instant Video. It's on PBS.com. That's how fucking boring this show is. It's on PBS.com.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, an important note, though.
You go to your web browser and type in P. There's no way it's guessing BS.com at the next two.
It airs on PBS over here. That's the
right.
That's
and it's a little behind here. Season 2 is just airing. By the time this episode posts, it will season 2 will have just finished airing. But they will not have aired the Christmas special, which obviously aired in Christmas. They're not airing it here. I don't know when. I actually couldn't figure out when they're airing it. So a lot of people are resorting to watching it online because
piracy.
It's let's call it it's piracy. And I saw an article somewhere. Because, I mean, obviously people have been pirating everything forever. But with this show, it's like the episodes are there. Like, it's online. Like, it's very soap opera. You want to really know what's happening next. And they're just there to be taken. Very few people. It's as easy to watch them as it is to go to PBS.com to watch the first season lately. It's so easy to take that next step and just keep streaming them.
I have a very fair policy when it comes to piracy, which is I will try to obtain what I want to see legally through every outlet that I can. And if I cannot get it anywhere legally, then they are keeping it from me on purpose to like drive up the price. And I'm happy to pay for stuff I want to watch, but like, you know, to artificially hold back this show from me for months so that it can air on PBS, a channel that my taxes pay for. Sure. By the way, I've already paid to watch this show in some way.
You have 50 tote bags.
I have the tote bags. I call in. So, you know, I don't really feel bad about doing it. Although Hugh Bonneville,
I read
the
that
actor,
too.
has a great quote.
One of the main characters.
He plays the Earl of Grantham, who's, you know, the guy who owns the house.
It's an ensemble piece, but he's probably like front and center on the DVD cover.
For the upstairs people, he is, you know, and I don't hear that this could be a great place to use the sound if I'm being inaccurate. I'm not sure that the upstairs refers to the people who live in the house, you know, the owners of the house.
I think it's like, you know,
because like some places, like you could see the maids' quarters and stuff being like up in the attic.
Oh, well, there's a case system among the servants too, where like Daisy and some of the lower end servants, like they barely ever see the light of day.
Yeah, they're not like allowed to even like come out at dinner time.
Right.
I mean, if you've seen Mrs. Patmore, you'll understand. Bing, and then you put up a picture of her. But yeah, it's
the other thing PBS does is they actually mess with the episode a little bit because they cut them up, at least online. I don't know exactly how the math works, but I think there's 7 1-hour episodes is how it was produced and conceived and shot. But on PBS, they broke it up into, I think, 4 1.5-hour episodes or something like that. Like
weird.
And
just watch the British one.
It's not a big deal, but it does mess with the pace. Like these are. Where the episode ends and where the next one begins isn't like an accident. It's a very deliberate decision of pacing the show, and it changes the show a little bit, and they're mucking with the show a little bit. So it's not even the best version. And I think people, they just want the best. Like they're like nothing. I think people have ethics, but when they find something they like, they're like nothing can get between me and that.
Here's
thing.
the deal: people who are gonna watch Downton Abbey are discerning television viewers. Like you're not gonna. Some kid's not gonna like flip over, you know, from MTV and see
he's watching
Edith Crawley attending to World War I, gas attack victims and be like, oh, I'm in. You know, this is a show watched by people who enjoy really good television writing, good storytelling, maybe history, like in my case.
Oh, we're gonna get to that.
So let's not. So why mess it up? Just give us the high-end version.
I want to go back to something you said about how they were deliberately holding back, because I don't think it's that malicious. I think certainly no one expected the show to become this popular. No one expected this show to be covered on the Jeff Rubin show. No one expected it to find like this audience of me and you, I think.
Somewhere in England, some office people are going nuts right now when they heard we were going to talk about this today.
Do you think Tom Phillip was an intern of ours, and he's a great dude. He's worked with us a lot. He lives in England. I haven't talked to him about this show. I wonder what his take on it is.
He doesn't seem to like...
But he loves TV. He loves
TV, and he's obviously a massive Doctor Who fan, but I don't think he likes England, like past quirky sci-fi shows. He seems to enjoy American things.
So wait, I want to go back to what I was saying. I think they just weren't prepared for this. Like, I don't think anyone was ready for Doctor Who, which, you know, has been around for 50 years, but has never been more popular, at least in America, than it is now. At first, they were episodes, it was the same thing. Doctor Who's were airing in America months after they had already aired in England. And if you think there's a fan base that's going to get the episodes, if you think Downton Abbey fans are going to download the episodes when they're ready, you should talk to Doctor Who fans.
The Doctor Who fans just go find it from some torrent site. Downton Abbey fans will like pay someone to go fly over to England and bring back the DVDs.
Doctor Who fans are literally still unearthing like lost episodes of Doctor Who that like people didn't think existed anymore when they find, like, that's the level of fandom they're talking about there. But now, once it did catch on here, and Doctor Who is another thing that really seems to have caught on here, they started airing them just a few hours later, like not exactly the same day because of time zone things, but it's not remarkably different than like a West Coast, East Coast thing. It's just a few hours later.
And I think that should be the model that we follow. Like, clearly, you know, a lot's been made of England and America's special relationship, you know, and they're often referring to wartime allies, but let's extend that relationship to each other's television. I know they enjoy Friends a lot over there. Right? When I lived in London for a little while, for in college for study abroad, and if I said I was American, the British people would start yelling at me about terrible American foreign policy. But if I said I'm from New York, all they wanted to do was talk about Friends and ask me questions about New York. And so they enjoy that quite a bit. We enjoy their television. Let's stop this artificial lag.
I suspect by the time Downton Abbey season 3 comes out, they'll have figured this out. I don't think anyone's quite prepared for the popularity of this. I think they'll, especially because they have Shirley MacLaine, who a very popular actress these
Oh my
days.
God.
But they did get Shirley MacLaine, who is, I guess she's best known for The Apartment still, which is crazy that she made that movie in like the 50s and you're still like, Shirley MacLaine, The Apartment. That's how like
I know, like I feel like that could, like imagine that with your life. They're like, oh, you're Jeff Rubin, right? From Bleep Bloop? When you're like 70.
The other thing I know Shirley MacLaine from, and I think people our age may know her from, is in Animaniacs. Remember there was the end of the theme song. It was like, totally insane-y, nah, nah. And like there was a different one they'd plug in. One of them was Shirley MacLaine, and it was like,
oh my God.
And it was her, and she was like looking over a crystal ball, because I guess in the 90s she like came out and said she was into mystic powers or something.
I can just see that joke being like pitched in the Animaniacs writing room by some 70-year-old writer who's like, trust me, the kids are gonna love this.
Well, Animaniacs had a ton of like that golden age
were
Hollywood
super
shit. Like,
super meta, and like
they'd have like Humphrey Bogart and like things
it
that
was
kids
weird.
Kids clearly didn't know, and and because the Animaniacs were sort of from that era, they were from like the golden age of cartoons or something.
Yeah, right. They were like, they're from like the old timey cartoons,
right.
Like those where you can't really tell what kind of animal they're supposed to be. And
but that
stuff.
show had a ton of jokes that I'm sure even though I watch it now, I wouldn't recognize like all the old movie stars in it.
That show holds up, man.
It does hold up. I think you're kidding. That show's great. Animaniacs is amazing.
I've listened to a few of the songs again, like on YouTube, gone and just watched the songs, and they're really, really well done.
Yeah, Animaniacs
like the countries, like all the countries of the world and stuff.
It's a very sharp show. I think that show, for me, like shaped a lot of my like comic sensibility, because it was like very silly, but like there was obviously like something else there, and like when
full disclosure, in the interest of full disclosure, you did grow up in a water tower. You lived in a water tower most of your early life.
I think it was just like I was watching it when I was very young, but there was like obviously something like darker and like something beneath the surface there where even if I didn't quite get it, I was like, what is going on here?
That's because you were like kind of a nerdy kid. Me as like kind of a cool kid. I was all Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, well,
like dirty, kind of a little harder. You know what I mean? You're over there singing songs about countries. I'm getting close-ups of rotten teeth.
I think Sam can sing all the country song or all the state song or something.
Sam's like autistic for 90s children's entertainment. He just he has cataloged it all.
We're talking about Sam Rice, who we work with. Anyway.
No, I'm talking about Sam from Downton Abbey, the footman.
Let's get back to Doctor Who and Downton Abbey, because there is something of these British shows. I think maybe the internet's partially responsible for this. A lot of these British shows have become very popular here. Downton Abbey, Doctor Who. The British adaptation of Sherlock, which is from the writer of Doctor Who, is also very popular. You said you just watched the first season of that. What do you think of that?
I watched it last night. Just sat down, watched all of it.
The whole first season?
The whole thing.
That is 4.5 hours, right?
Yep. That's what happens when your wife is like, girls' night, I'm going out. And I'm like, me night, I sit alone and watch TV for 5 hours, for a school day.
And you've been married how long?
For like 6 months now, 5 months.
And what do you think of Doctor Who? Or I'm sorry, of Sherlock.
I liked it.
Let's take a brief Sherlock tour.
It was
I love
it was
Sherlock.
fun.
It's great.
When I lived in London, I lived across the street from Sherlock Holmes's house on Baker Street.
Really?
In my building, which was,
I don't know why I'm gonna be honest. I sounded more interested in that than I was. I was like, wow. Really?
Well, I was just gonna say, it seems like they didn't shoot it on location, because there's like a Sherlock Holmes museum there, where it's like you can go in his house.
Did you see
his fictional house?
Right, I'm sure. There's like a statue of him, isn't there? There's
yeah.
somewhere.
It's a real address.
Of him by Reichbach Falls or wherever, which is a big Sherlock Holmes location in the stories. You'll get to season 2.
Okay, yeah. I'm not there yet. I thought it was fun,
Sherlock's another one where I don't think season 2 has actually aired in America yet.
I wasn't able to obtain season 2, so I will now, as is my policy, will now go hunt it down illegally.
Have you seen the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock?
I have. The Law Downey joint. I have.
I saw that around the same time I saw season 1 of the show, and thought the movie was okay, but I thought the show like really blew. Like the show made me enjoy the movie less because I was like, oh, that's how you do it.
I do think there's something lost. There's something lost in putting him in modern times. Just because, for me personally, I think old timey things are funny.
Yeah, we're the opposite in that respect.
Yeah, like I just think they're funny. When they didn't have like cell phones and stuff. But that said, it's in the show. It's really, I think, well done how they work in kind of modern technology. But this, Sherlock is still this like master of deduction and like a weird sociopathic guy, and
he's so good on that show. And now he's gonna be in everything.
He is as weird looking as Matt Smith, like in Doctor Who. That they found like the two weirdest looking dudes in England. And made them the leads of quirky, nerdy shows.
I have one more British TV digression we're going to take before we get back to Downton Abbey. Doctor Who and Sherlock, both written by Stephen Moffat, who is one of my favorite writers. He also did a JEKYLL miniseries, which is really good and worth tracking down. And he also did a show called Coupling, which is also really good. It resembles Friends, which we were talking about before.
Yes.
It's like, it looks a lot like Friends on a superficial level. There's like 3 guys, 3 girls, 20-somethings, hookups and talking about relationships and that kind of thing. But I think fans of Doctor Who would feel right at home because there's a lot of... Every episode has some weird gimmick to it. There's a lot, like, you see things out of order, or you see things from one perspective, then another. It's very clever. Every episode has... Not every episode, but most episodes have some clever way they play with perspective, just like Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who episodes. That show, Coupling, great show, was remade, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, for NBC. They did an NBC version of Coupling, and it bombed. And that's something we see here a lot is British shows imported to America that bombed. Prime Suspect is one that came out this year. But Free Agents came out this year.
I mean, for everyone that bombs, you get like an Office, a Sanford and Son, an All in the Family.
Three's Company, I believe, was a British show.
I mean, you know what's so weird? It's like
we'll check up on that.
It's like, All in the Family. It's like, oh, that was a rip off of a British show. That was a remade British show, and it's like, well, the plot's like a family.
I mean, it's crazy to think about that because that show is so That show is so thoroughly American.
Yeah,
His chair is literally in the Smithsonian. It doesn't get more American than that.
I think I remember there was a question in my American history SAT 2, or no, it was the AP history test when I was going to college, and everyone talked about it. It was like the All in the Family question. Just this random question about All in the Family. It was like, which 1970s sitcom showed like, the dying or the something about like, an racist conservative or something. And everyone was like, what is this question doing on the American history test? But
well, that's why it's interesting.
There it was.
That's a great example of porting a show over because there was a basic premise about conservative dad with little kids, and they like completely obviously gave it its own identity. But what's also really interesting about that is it goes the other way too, and you and I don't see that as much. But there's a British That 70s show that I don't think lasted very long. There's like they do like British version. There's a British. Well, I don't know if there's a British Friends. It goes the other
Coupling.
way too. No.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the British versions of American shows. I know they seem to import just regular American shows. Like I know The Simpsons has been big in England for almost as long as it's been big in America. Our sense of humor, for all that's made about like the British sense of humor, this kind of dry or hyper silly sense of humor, I think that's like for the elitists, where the broad, the broad population just kind of likes the same things we like.
I just pulled up a list. I didn't listen to anything you just said. I can't wait to go back and listen to this later. Hear what you said. I pulled up a list of American shows that were adapted into British shows. Oh, I did it the wrong way. I did American series based on British shows. I fucked it up. Is this worth going down the rabbit hole? Do we care enough?
I mean, I haven't seen any of them, I don't think.
All right, so let's start bringing it back to Downton Abbey. I think the internet is at least partially responsible for these shows becoming more popular here to the point where people want to watch them immediately. Like, I probably heard about Downton Abbey on the internet first, if not first, the most. I saw a lot of tweets about it. The AV Club was really into it. It was like clear that something was happening there. And someone asked me if I had watched ALCATRAZ yet recently. I'm going to bring us back to Downton Abbey, which is J.J. Abrams' new show. And it also has Jorge Garcia, who played Hurley on Lost. I did watch the first 2 episodes. They were not very good.
Really?
And I said so someone asked if I watched it, and I said I watched the first 2 episodes, and then I was like, I haven't heard anyone say anything about it, and I feel like if there's a good show out there, I will hear about it. Like, the system is in place now. I don't think there's any great shows out there that are just, like, completely under my radar, and I spend a little bit of time researching this, but it's not that hard.
I think you
I like to read about these things, but it's not, if there's something good out there, it rises, which I think is cool.
I think you might be a special case, though, because you're surrounded by people who are, who live for good TV and who want to talk about it. It's funny you bring that up because last night, Vanessa, my wife, was out with some of her friends from work, and they were all talking about TV, and she came back and was like a little embarrassed because what I make us watch are these weird ass shows, and she couldn't talk to anyone. She's like, everyone just watches The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and I'm like, oh, have you guys seen Downton Abbey? And they all just look at her like she's some freak. So I think that we are in a small pocket.
But even amongst us, I do think that there is a system in place now where good shows get recognized at some point in their lifespan.
Yeah, and the internet is definitely responsible.
Okay, Downton Abbey, we haven't really talked about it that much. So we said it sounds really boring, but we both really like it. So what's good about it? How would you convince someone that hasn't seen the show? Why should someone watch it?
It's the kind of show that you like almost in spite of it. Like we said,
I don't know if you're helping.
Well, it should be super boring, like we keep saying, and you put it on, and you're really only going on people's recommendations. So you're really only going on people saying, this is a good show, just trust me, you get wrapped up in it. And by the end of the first or second episode, you find yourself wondering what's going to happen to the characters and the stakes are fairly low. It's like, who will inherit the Abbey?
Yeah.
It's not like, who's going to die, or there's no huge action. It's like,
well, this is something Pat said. I think Pat said it either in real life or when we were recording the Breaking Bad podcast, or possibly both, that Mad Men is one of the very few shows on air, certainly one of the very few shows that's popular and well-liked by everyone, that there's no guns, there's no lawyers.
There is a lawnmower.
Right, but there's no, generally there's no, life and death stakes week to week like there is on Breaking Bad or Battlestar or Lost or The Wire or any of these great, great shows. I like that Lost slipped right into that list. Right?
Yeah.
The greats. And Mad Men's one of the very few shows that people like, and it's an amazing show that doesn't have that. And I think that is more to do with how hard it is to get a show on TV. And it's really hard to get a show on TV where you're like, it's about this couple, and they're going to argue a lot, and you want to know if they're going to stay together. That's a tough thing to sneak in. But I think Mad Men does it, and I think Downton Abbey is one of these other shows that is doing that, where it's a really good show. It's really fun and compelling, but there's not a drug deal that may go bad every week.
Right. I think, it's so different from our world now. Like, that world that existed 100 years ago is so shockingly different from how things are now that it's almost like, for me as a history fan, it's a fun peek into the way society was structured back then. So that's why, that's the initial hook for me, was let's see the last gasp of the aristocracy in England. But I don't know why normal people who aren't history fans like it. It's obviously well written.
It has a love of the 1910s. Mad Men has a love of the 60s. The costumes, the props, every shot is very much invoking that era. And that's something I want to talk to you about, because something last week on the show when we were interviewing the Dothraki guy, I talked about how foreign languages were always my worst subject. History, my second worst subject. I've never been into history.
It's so fascinating
and
that you don't like it.
You love history.
And
when I started watching the show, it was I could almost get along with it because I thought it almost was like a sci-fi premise to me. I was like, what is this world? Are these people slaves? What is going on here? I had absolutely no idea what the setting was about. And I don't know that I still don't understand it. I was like, what is this era of history? I knew nothing about it.
So you got to think kind of at a macro level about the setting.
Okay.
So the late 1910s, the late aughts, and it goes into the 20s.
The show starts with the Titanic going down,
Right?
Like the 1914, maybe.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. I'm like, yeah. I was just talking about how much I like history. I think it's 1914, but I'm not sure.
And so far, it's gone about 5 or 6.
It'll take
like,
huge leaps.
Yeah,
like you'll go episode to episode. It'll be months
through time, right?
Yeah. Much like Doctor Who. Anyway, when you look at England from that era, because like you said, you're like, what are these people, slaves? Like the people who work there are terrified of the owners of the house, and it's like, do they own this village? It was the end of the British Empire. So for the past 100, 200, 300 years, since they defeated the Spanish, really, the British kind of ran the world. You know, they were like world beaters. And this is kind of the tail end of that era. So it's like the beginning of the lower classes being like, hey, this is kind of fucked up, like this structure we have.
Yeah.
But then the aristocracy and the gentry, the lords and ladies, like that was all kind of coming to a close. I mean, they still have it, but it's not like, you know, it's not looked at in the same way of this like, oh, well, these God has made these people better than us. Like I'm only fit to scrub a dish, you know. But at that point, you have like modern technologies coming in, but you still have this kind of medieval class structure that's slowly crumbling. So I think that's why they picked that era to set the show, because that's when the lower classes kind of started to assert themselves, and you see it in the driver, you know, who's like this fiery Irish revolutionary, who's just not afraid of them.
I think that's something that's also a lot like Mad Men. It takes place during a time of great social change.
Yes, upheaval.
A lot like Mad Men, and there's a lot of people being like, it won't be this way forever, you know.
And I think there's like, it's not really spoken about on the show, but there's this underlying feeling of when they're like, oh, it won't be like this forever. Maybe not just talking about the class structure, but just like England being the world's power.
Oh, that's,
you know, because the Americans are becoming, you know, we're kind of getting our national pride together. Like we had the Civil War, it kind of messed us up for a while. The 1890s America kind of became an industrial power. And then into the early 1900s, like we started gathering momentum.
Let me ask you this. What is the deal with World War I? Because I've never heard of it before, but based on this show, it seems like it was pretty bad.
So yeah, it was pretty gnarly war. Kind of got overshadowed, at least in America, by World War II.
Right, I guess that's true. And War Horse is doing this too now. I think War Horse came out and everyone was like, "Oh, a World War I movie."
Yeah, World War I. In a lot of ways, I think, you know, when you read about it, you're like, God, that was a worse war for the soldiers.
Was the body count higher in World War I or II?
World War II.
Oh.
I mean, that was like,
I was hoping for like a secret underground war that no one knew about.
No, I think
I'm coming from a position. I'm so ignorant of history. I'm so sorry, people.
I mean, World War II has this perfect villain in Hitler,
right?
You know, in the Nazis, like
World War II is like you can make a cartoon.
It's like
about,
so clearly the Germans were, and that in that show in the Mitchell and Webb look, they have a sketch about. It's my favorite comedy sketch of all time about the German SS soldiers stitching skull and crossbones and being like, "I think we might be the bad guys. We have skulls and crossbones all over our uniform."
It's very funny.
So I think. You know, that's kind of the more attractive war. You have this perfect villain.
It's a little more dramatic. I don't want to say it's better for. I don't want to write off World War I, but it's a little easier for drama, maybe, or it's a little.
It was a more justified war because it's like this guy was clearly evil. Germany needed to be stopped. Japan needed to be stopped. World War I, it was like complicated alliances that drew everyone into it. And it was like the Archduke was assassinated by some weird Serbian terrorist group, and somehow this is like erupted into this.
Even
war.
You, as a history fan, you're like, and somehow this erupted into a war.
Yeah, I think what it was.
That's like my high school history take on it. Is as I know Archduke Ferdinand got killed, and then I think even when you're learning it, they're like, he got killed, and then shit jumped off.
I think it was a lot. What made the war so bad, and why a lot of that. In the literature around it is like talks about the lost generation and like because there really was no point to it and there was no winner. It was like it was these complicated alliances between countries that drew everyone into this war that all of a sudden stalemated, and like millions of people died. And then it's like, wait, why did we do that?
There is a moment on this show where one character announces, "Gentlemen, we're at war," and it's supposed to be this really, it's supposed to be this huge, really dramatic thing. And I was like, I don't know what the implications of that are.
I remember he's at like a garden party. He's like, "May I have everyone's attention? We're at war with Germany."
And I was like, I don't know what that means for everyone.
You thought he was talking about World War II, didn't you?
It was World War I. I just like, the show like obviously like thought like, oh my God, they're going to be at war now. And I was like, I don't know what that means for anyone.
So why the war was so bad? And this is like, like freshman year history. Look at it. Europe hadn't, there had been wars in Europe, of course, but no modern war had happened yet. So in the time between the last big fights in Europe, they had developed machine guns and like accurate mortars and kind of mechanized warfare, repeating rifles, things like that. But they went into the war thinking, and I think this might be what War Horse is about. I haven't seen it.
Seen War Horse either.
But they kind of approached it at first from a very like old timey, almost medieval style of fighting of like, let's march at each other, let's wear our bright uniforms and our bright blue and red uniform. And very quickly people were just getting mowed down, and like they had all these horses that were like, the cavalry was a thing still, and it's like you can just mow down a line of cavalry with a machine gun, no problem. And so they didn't really know what to do, so they just dug trenches. Because they were like, okay, well, at least we're not getting slaughtered if we're in here.
God, trench warfare, again, I'm basing this only on Downton Abbey, but it seems like it was really bad.
Yeah, really bad. I mean, that's why people, like, what happened was that was a reaction to them not being mobile enough yet. So, like, the soldiers had these machine guns, but tanks didn't come into it till, like, the very, very end of the war. So there was really no way to, like, attack each other en masse without getting completely slaughtered. There wasn't really too much air support. All the things that made World War II kind of a mobile war. It was like quick. We were able to move goods around quickly. We had like big cargo planes that could drop things in. So they had the firepower, just they didn't have the mobility. So they were like, let's dig a hole and we'll be in the hole. And then they would just like spend weeks and months killing each other to move a few feet, to like move the trenches half a mile or a mile this way. And it was, I guess, really damaging, like psychologically damaging for a lot of soldiers. And the one thing I like about
Which
Downton,
is depicted in the show with, I think, Mr. Mosley or something, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of it, just like messed up, totally mentally messed up people. But the one thing Downton Abbey didn't do that I'm excited about is they don't talk about the Americans coming into it hardly at all. And I think we in America, as we get when we're educated about it, it's like, oh, America played a big part in this war, and we didn't. We like came in pretty close to the end. We weren't very effective. Like our soldiers weren't good. Like we had like crappy rifles and stuff like that. And it was over pretty soon after we got there. So I think for the British, it was like a much, much worse war than it was for the Americans.
Maybe that's why I don't know as much about it.
Yeah, for us as a nation, it wasn't as consequential. I think it helped cement us as like a power, though, I think it definitely helped turn the tide when we got in there to convince everyone to be like, okay, let's just broker some peace. And then Woodrow Wilson was kind of the guy who's trying to like set up the precursor to the UN, the League of Nations.
Interesting. Kind of.
God, yeah, I mean, it's like, I think it's a much more interesting war than World War II because there were gas attacks and like...
Yeah, gas is weird.
Machine guns were just like game changers. Like no one knew what to do. Before then you could shoot one bullet. You could, maybe shoot a few, but you couldn't shoot like 1,000 bullets in a minute. And you just have these guys getting mowed down and they just didn't know what to do about it. And they didn't really have good tanks or anything like that. It just sounds like totally brutal.
It's interesting, and it's to Downton Abbey's credit that I learned absolutely nothing about World War I, or at least retained absolutely nothing about World War I my entire life. And then I watched the show, and I was like, maybe I should at least read the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, I think there was also that like it contributed to the demise of this kind of noble society. You know, like as people are just getting blown apart in holes filled with their own shit. It's like, how can you be the noble lord of the land when you're like crouched down in a little shit-filled hole?
All right, let's talk about something I know about. Let's talk about Downton Abbey itself. I think we're ready to turn that corner, get into Spoilerville.
All right, here we go.
Should we tell like a transitionary anecdote to give people time to take out their iPod, maybe press pause if they haven't watched the show yet? So we are about to start talking about the show. Let me tell you why I don't know anything about history. This is kind of a fun story. I had a teacher in high school who he was a history teacher. And this is, by the way, people, this is your time to get out your iPod, get ready to stop. Because after this story, we're going right into fucking Downton Abbey Season 2 spoilers. So I had a history teacher who, I swear to God, put all of the answers on the tests. And everyone knew it. Everyone knew it. They were all multiple choice tests. And each multiple choice across the paper, the answers are on the left side. First of all, multiple choice already easy.
Yeah, very simple.
So there's answers on the left side. On the right side, there was a line with the correct answer. And everyone knew it. And it was every test throughout the year. I knew it was coming. Like, I had him sophomore or junior. I don't remember. But, like, I knew that, like, he was a teacher that did this. So he did this for several years. I guess in retrospect, looking back, like he must have just been up against retirement and just like, I don't feel like. I mean, he sat there and talked about
phoning it in.
He sat there and talked about history every day. He like went through the motions, but he was like, I can't be bothered to make sure the students get good test scores.
I had great. I mean, like,
and you had great history.
I had great history teachers. I had like very enthusiastic.
I would have considered him an amazing history teacher. I have nothing but the highest regard for the way he taught that class, but maybe I didn't learn that much history.
I never understood. Like, I look at, so like, you know, we're in New York right now. I'm looking at your window. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at all these huge buildings, billions and billions of bricks. And like 400 years ago, this was like a farm.
Yeah,
you know. So like,
cool.
It's very interesting to me in a way that working out a math problem, I was like, you know, I truly was like, when am I going to use this? I know I'm not going to need this ever. And I don't need history, but it like makes me appreciate the present.
That's cool. I think I was just better at math, to be honest. Like I was just like, I'm not good at math by any means, but I could wing it.
Yeah, history. I mean, and I think where a lot of kids get screwed in history. Again, this is a good transition to stop listening. Where a lot of kids get screwed is like in route memorization. I never had teachers who were like, you will tell me the years of all the wars, because who gives a shit? It was more like, let's talk about like the motivations and like why things were the way they were. It made it interesting.
I had another teacher. I really looked out because like 3 out of the 4 history classes had this like one really hard guy, but I guess there was some spillover. And I had this teacher who did retire a year or two after. And before the exam, the day before the exam, there'd be a study, like an exam preparation session, and he would tell you exactly what was on the test, like question by question, like you might. And then at the end, he'd be like,
might want to remember Abe Lincoln.
It wasn't like that. It was
Abe Lincoln.
You might want to remember one reason we entered World War I is the assassination. And then quick exam, first question. What's one reason we entered? And then it would always end with like, you might want to remember like 3 parts of the New Deal that thought, and then like the map was pulled over the essay question. And then he'd like reveal the essay question very dramatically, even though he had given it to us the day before. I really appreciate that. Let's talk about Downton Abbey. Let's get into the show itself.
No.
I like the show. I like the second season better than the first. I like the first season better than the second season. Gets a little soap opera.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about all of season 2. The Christmas special, I believe, has not aired in America, though based on the fact I'm saying I believe, I guess you can probably guess. Obviously, I ordered it from England. They got a Region 2 DVD player.
And I watched a PAL formatted.
So let's try to keep it to just season 1 and 2. Season 2 gets a little soap opera-y, particularly with, like, literally, I'm talking handicapped people miraculously, or paralyzed people miraculously recovering. I'm talking dead cousins returning from the grave that had amnesia and forgot who they were.
Right. I mean, it goes. It reminds me a little bit of the OC. I don't think were you an OC watcher?
I was not.
First season of the OC, very very much about the kids hooking up and the parents' lives. It's all very normal. season 2 starts to get a little crazy. You know, couple crazy things start happening. Say in the same way that Downton Abbey has some kind of unrealistic plot points come into play.
You know what the arc seems like to me, and I actually hadn't thought about this until just now, is it reminds me a lot of Deadwood, where the first season of Deadwood is like not a straight up, but it's very much a Western. Like, people shoot each other to solve their problems.
Yeah.
Then season 2, they start to get incorporated into America. The threat of annexation looms.
Right.
And the show becomes about how this world changes and how you can't solve your problems in a gunfight anymore. And I think Downton Abbey, in a similar way, season 1 is like your classic British, everyone's all proper. But season 2 is the war, and I think maybe we're looking at a show that's about, like you were saying, how we transitioned out of that. And it starts as, just like how Deadwood started as a Western, this starts as like a very prim and proper show, but maybe evolves into like how we got out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the point with Downton Abbey all along, was that they want to show like the destruction of the British aristocracy.
I can't believe we've been talking about Downton Abbey this long and we have not brought up the Dowager Countess.
The Dowager Countess is just wonderful.
So the Dowager Countess, if you're still listening, I guess you've watched the show, but the Dowager Countess is the character played by Maggie Smith, who is,
yes.
If you don't know her by name, you've certainly seen her in movies. She was McGonagall, I think is her name, in Harry Potter. She's in Sister Act. She's in Hook. I mean, she's been in
like when you need like a kind of scary old British lady, you know, that's who you're going for.
You know, I looked her up though because I want to see pictures. She's been acting forever. She has she won an Oscar in the 50s or the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, she's been around for a long time. She used to be gorgeous. I mean, she still is like a very, beautiful woman, but she used to be like,
yo, all right, man, you kind of lost me there. Like, she's like 90 years old.
I was trying to be polite. She's still
she's an incredible actress.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think she's been acting. First of all, she used to be beautiful. She still is,
I believe
maybe,
you.
But she's been acting for like 50 years. Like, if you do something for 50 years, you get real fucking good at it.
She's the highlight of the show.
She's like the Fonzie of that show. She's like the breakout character.
Not only is she the best character, but she's the comic relief.
Totally.
In the same way that your like racist grandpa is the comic relief at family gatherings. Because, like your racist grandpa, he just like says stuff that you're like, I can't believe your brain works like that. And that's the Dowager Countess's role, is to kind of like scheme and meddle and say outrageous. She has no qualms about wanting things to be the old way, where your kitchen staff wouldn't even look you in the eye. She wants to return to that. I think in season 2 she kind of becomes aware that times are changing and she has to go along with it. But she will like fight it to its last breath.
Pat compared her to Roger Sterling from Mad Men, who's a character who's like kind of stuck in the past, but he's too old to change his ways, and everyone's just like, all right, like they recognize that he's that. Yeah,
I mean,
he's from that era.
They're all the racist grandpa. Like you just let your grandpa be racist, because it's like, you can't change him. That's how he is. So like, just put up with it and try to find it funny if you can.
She's such a fun character on the show, because she literally just swings in and just like drops a one-liner, and it's like, boom, next scene.
Yeah. I love her interactions with Mrs. Crawley, who's the heir apparent's mother. Who's
Cousin Isabel.
Cousin Isabel, yeah. She is more kind of this bleeding heart, liberal, like, very much in favor of change. She's not from this aristocracy, but she's an upper class woman. But they go at it in this like snippy British old lady way that's so fun to watch.
Who is your favorite character in the ensemble? Mine's Carson. Who's yours? Carson, of course, the head butler.
Carson is great. Carson's kind of like the Dowager Countess. Like, he prefers the old way. He's very. But he's like, I was born to serve. He takes a great amount of pride in serving this rich family.
That's, I think, one of the more interesting things about the show is that is it wrong for these people to be servants is not totally clear. Like, Carson in particular seems very comfortable with his life.
Do you think, I've always watched this show and wondered if Carson's a virgin?
Oh, within the context of the show. It'd be cool to get. Well,
He's
has
never
that
been
backstory
married, right?
in that episode where like he was like in vaudeville, right? And he was like, so like he had a life before he was a servant.
I should explain to the Jeff Rubin Show listeners that I'm a little. I never know the characters' names because I watched this show. It took me like 3 days to watch the entire show.
I mean, this is a man who watched 4.5 hours of Sherlock just last night.
I watch shows at a sprint, so I don't like have time to commit the characters' names to memory. But hopefully, I'm familiar with all the plot.
So far, you've been good.
I've been pretty good.
I mean, I looked at because there's only 7 episodes in the first season, 8 in the second, plus that Christmas special. So that's like about 1 season of American television, let's say, on network, if not cable. And I looked at the ensemble picture of the whole cast, and I could name most of the characters. I was like, I can't believe I fucking know all this now.
I'll tell you who I like. I like Mrs. Patmore.
Oh, of course.
I like Matthew because Matthew was talked into being an aristocrat so quickly. Like, remember when he shows up, he's like, "I'm gonna work, and I'm not gonna sit around all day," and blah blah blah. And then very quickly, he just kind of like got into this like upper class mode. I don't like Lady Mary. I like Lady Sybil. She's kind of a badass.
Well, she's very liberal. She's very like modern, I guess, for lack of a better word. What do you think? I always love
honestly, the Earl of Grantham.
Oh, he's great. Dude. Yeah, he's a super dude.
Because he's like good. He's good deep down. He's like a good guy.
Yeah.
You get the sense through the show that he's kind of torn between like, should I abandon what I've built here and like go for the modern era, or should I like listen to mom and keep it the way it is?
I guess a lot of the characters that are easy to like are the ones that are comfortable with their position in life, like Carson and the Earl, and maybe Miss Patmore too.
I like Thomas too. I hate him. Everyone hates him.
I always love villains, so I love Thomas and Miss O'Brien. Did you see that picture of Miss O'Brien on like the red carpet?
She's like really pretty. You're like, whoa.
Miss O'Brien is like the coldest, nastiest bitch on the show, and she looks it. But then there was a picture of her and some of the other cast members on the red carpet. And it's funny to see any of them in modern day clothes. But Mrs. O'Brien, you were like, yeah.
Not Mrs. Patmore, really.
No,
although Daisy's pretty cute.
Definitely. Well, I saw the picture I saw of Daisy was like, it was like a photo shoot. Like the other one was, I think the one probably everyone's seen is, if they've seen this, is Thomas, Patmore, Miss O'Brien, and who was the fourth person there? Maybe Daisy. On the red carpet. But then I saw another picture of Daisy that was from like GQ or Esquire, maybe even Stuff or something like that.
FHM.
And she was obviously very good looking. I mean, they're all actresses, They're all. And I actually saw a thing on YouTube yesterday that was like a panel a lot of them were doing. And here's a character I'm struggling with. Anna, right? Anna is the one with Miss O'Brien.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I always forget her name. All I refer to as is Mr. Bates.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's the guy, and he's dating the woman who's always like, Mr. Bates.
She had like a weird, like almost like Amy Winehouse, like beehive. It's funny just to see any of them in modern day clothes.
She's this kind of like waifish, cute, like buttoned up little British girl. And there's a scene in season 2 where her and Mr. Bates, Mr. Bates. They get freaky, they get it on, and she has her like hair down and she's like laying in bed, and you're like, oh, you're like an attractive, like she doesn't look like she's from the 1920s anymore. You're like, oh, you're just like a really pretty girl. I get it. You're an actress, and you auditioned for this role.
The romance of Mr. Bates and Anna.
Jeff's getting a phone call right now.
It's from Pat, actually. Should we answer it? I'm gonna answer this on the line.
It seems like extremely disrespectful to me.
Well, it's Pat. Everyone knows Pat. Hold on, Pat.
Hey, what's up, man?
Pat, Streeter and I are recording. You are live on the Jeff Rubin show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I put you on speakerphone.
Hey, Pat.
Oh my God, Streeter.
We're talking about Downton Abbey. Mr. Bates and Anna. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love that. That's my favorite romantic relationship in the series.
Streeter and I are shaking our head. No, we disagree.
Yeah. Wait, who likes it? Who doesn't?
We both disagree with you.
We disagree.
Really, but I feel like Mr. Bates is just so quiet and nice, and they're just both such nice, honest people.
I think that when they got together, I was like, oh, that's supposed to be a thing? Oh, wait, Pat's seen all of season 2, right? He hasn't seen the Christmas special, I think. Right, Pat?
I have I have not, but you know, you can.
They're just fucking interminable. Like the way that the way that Mrs. O'Brien, or yeah, the original Mrs. O'Brien, who he wants to divorce, like she divorces him.
Not O'Brien, Mrs. Bates.
Mrs. Bates, the original Mrs. Bates. She divorces him, then she takes him back, then she she's okay with the divorce, then she's not. Then she's okay with it again. This is like all over the span of like 3 episodes. He's like, we can finally get married. No, wait, she's back.
I know, and they're not.
Yeah, there's definitely a flashback scene where you learn why she hates him so much.
And they're not hooking up this whole time.
Horrible drunk or something.
Yeah, there's no, I don't understand. He's so likable, but everyone, like Miss O'Brien and the former Mrs. Bates, both hate him so much. He's like the most pleasant, likable person on that show.
I think I was talking to Craig or someone who was watching, and he was talking about how or maybe it was Emily, how it was weird in the first episode how just blindly everyone wants to date. Who does that mean to someone just because they have a limp?
He has a limp. But he has a limp.
Yeah, and not only is Mrs. O'Brien mean to Mr. Bates in the pilot, she's mean to him for the next 6 years. She just carries this hatred of this insane rivalry with him, where she ruins his life for no perceptible reason.
I know why they don't like him, though. There's a clear reason they don't like him. Because he's like the Earl's boy.
She's so perfect. Mrs. Bates is so perfect. She looks like every mean school teacher you've ever had. She's so well casted as that role.
Yeah, we were just talking about how hot she is in real life, too.
Yeah, did you see that? It's all the different
You know, we're just talking about it now. Everyone's seen the same picture. All right, Pat, I'm going to let you go because I'm not sure if any of this is actually getting into the microphone. Thanks so much for doing this.
Cool. I'm getting dinner with my parents, but I will call you after.
All right, we'll be around.
I'm definitely glad we're recording all of this. This is.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you for putting me on, though.
So what were we talking about before Pat called?
Before Pat called and ruined the show, we were talking about our favorite characters.
Okay.
And I had said that I like Thomas because he's so evil, but then you kind of feel bad for him because he's gay. And that's just
the Thomas being gay is something that's in the pilot, I believe. It's in the very first episode, and you don't. I mean, it's part of his character. Certainly, maybe why he's so scheming and not the gay people.
Whoa! I just want to be very clear that Jeff Rubin said gay people are scheming.
No, but he's very oppressed. He can't really, in that society, in the world he lives in, he can't really live his life. And, so it's part of it, but you don't see. It's a real part of the first 3 episodes. Then it doesn't come up explicitly ever again. Really.
He's also one of those great characters who is just not satisfied with his station in life, you know?
Which goes what we were saying with the Earl and Mr. Carson.
Even though he's kind of evil in a lot of ways, you're kind of, I want to root for you because we as modern people probably don't want that society to continue. So I'm rooting for Thomas to kind of upend things.
Yeah.
Or at least climb through the ranks, you know?
And he and Miss O'Brien will, for specifically Thomas, there's one scene I'm thinking of where he sides with the servants just because they always get screwed. And even though he doesn't generally like a lot of his coworkers, he's like, why is this always us?
Yeah, he's kind of rabble rouser a little bit, you know?
What'd you think of the Daisy and William? Is William her husband?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that stuff?
I don't know what's up with Daisy because, at first she likes Thomas and then it becomes clear that
ain't it.
In so many ways they're trying to be he likes penises and she's just not getting it. And then, she goes for the footman and he dies in the war. Post-war.
He had red shirt written all over.
Yeah. He was way too smiley and chipper.
Yeah.
To not get killed in a war, and I don't understand. I guess I don't understand her character's arc yet. There's got to be something else because why wouldn't she like this dude? He's a nice, handsome guy.
Yeah.
Who's very pleasant to her, and she just won't go for it. She feels and I got a little sick of the the very drawn out plot of her going to visit the dad and feeling bad about marrying him. Although it was a little weird that Mrs. Patmore, this is Daisy's boss, basically forces her to marry this kid.
I did think sometimes this show puts forth, I think this is a sign of a Greek show, it puts forth ethical conundrums where it's not really clear who's right. And there was a good example of that in the first season, I think, where Matthew is talking about how when he inherits it, he's not going to have servants, and the Earl is like, so you're just going to fire all these people? They need a place to live. And it's not really clear, like, what the right thing to do in that place is. I think the Miss Patmore and Daisy thing, I think the Miss Patmore-Daisy relationship is maybe more interesting than the Daisy and whatever her husband's name is relationship, because the idea of, like, so this guy's about to die, all he wants to do is marry this girl. Is it right for her to marry him, even though she doesn't really feel the same way, just to give him a few hours of comfort? Is an interesting dilemma.
Also, Miss Patmore very rightly points out, like, if you marry him, you can get the widow's pension from the government, and like if not, it's just going to go to no one.
And that's maybe one of the best Dowager Countess scenes is when she like forces the priest to marry them. When she's Let me tell you, it's great when she like harnesses her powers for good. And it's like when they call Captain Planet on the show. You just feel great.
She shows up to put everything right.
Yeah.
I mean, the characters are they're all very interesting in their own way. Some, like Carson, I don't really find too compelling. Just because he's so predictable. Like, Carson's always going to he's always going to tell the Earl what's up. Yeah. Like, whenever someone kind of, like, confides in him or he finds out about something, the next scene is always him being like, "Your lordship, I only thought it right that you should know." Blah, blah, blah. Like, every time he's in there narking, he's just a straight-up narc.
It'd be interesting. I'd love to see a prequel about how Carson rose through the ranks to become
that would make me maybe like him a little bit more.
The show is moving through time so
very quickly.
Like, wondering, like, if they're just going to, like, run out of thread at some point.
I mean, they have...
Because it started with the Titanic, and now they're into the 20s. Like, they're going to start season 3 in the 20s, and each season's been, like, 3 or 4 years, as opposed to Mad Men, which is, I don't know, maybe about a year per season. There was a jump at some point. I'm not totally sure. They're keeping Mad Men within the 60s is pretty clear.
The rate at which things change. I mean, the 60s obviously were a very tumultuous time, but like we were kind of on that track already. We're on like the fast track to change in the 60s. Like the arc of change from the early 1900s to like the 40s is massive, That's interesting. And we're already like halfway through it.
And the characters, I wonder if they'll age the characters at all, because the like Lord Grantham, like the Dowager Countess will be at some point like 10 years older than she was in the pilot.
Yeah, and she's already 1,000.
Yeah.
And like what else? She
looks a little old for that era. Like, I don't know that people live to be that old in that era.
Some of the girls need to start getting pregnant too, because like Mary is how old now? Like they're getting too old to like.
Well, I think have
kids.
I think that is very much present in the show, that like there's a lot of pressure on Mary that she's like becoming an old maid, even though to our sensibilities, certainly to us living in the city, I think people get married later.
28 is like, oh yeah, well, but fine.
But I think within the show that Mary, who I think is supposed to be a little bit younger than 28, is like obviously feeling a lot of pressure to marry someone. And how great is this? Pat pointed this out to me too. No, wait, Pat didn't point this out to me. That Mary's husband, who she wants to marry, Sir Richard, I think.
Sir Richard.
The newspaper is Jorah from Game of Thrones, the guy who is Daenerys' like the knight who explains to. He goes
like
along with Daenerys.
The one knight who's like staying with the
He's like
with the blonde girl.
Right.
See, this is why I never know names.
He introduces her into the Dothraki culture.
Right.
That it's him, and that made me really.
He's a great character because he's like this like shows the kind of the evils and the baselessness of new money, like the new money people. Right. Like they don't have. However outdated and awful these kind of like old aristocrats are in their weird society, the new money people are just like horrible. They make them look just evil and like conniving and cruel. Whereas like, they never make the Earl of Grantham look cruel. You're never like, he'll do things that are very morally questionable.
But you understand why he's angry or whatever.
But he's never like evil in the way that Sir Richard is.
So I'm like you. I devoured this whole show in 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. A week for your case.
It's complete. Is there a name for that kind of show? Is there a word for this yet?
There should be.
like, you know, like a show, like, I mean, Portlandia just did the Battlestar sketch, like, sums it up nicely. The like let's just watch one more episode type show, like The Wire, Battlestar.
I found that way more with the first season and I can't quite put my finger on what changed. It got a little more soap opera. I think the war stuff wasn't quite as compelling.
It's just bigger, like everything, you know. It's so, the first season is so focused on Downton and like the little things and how they ripple through the house. I mean, there is like the dead Turkish guy. There's like some big kind of moments, but season 2 is like, you know, murder trials and World War I and like these big things.
Yeah, I remember when I was watching season 1, a lot of episodes would end, and I would be like, should I watch another one? And that's a big commitment with that show. Those shows, like a lot of the great shows, I think this is something we talked about in the Breaking Bad episode too. Like a good show, like Breaking Bad or The Wire, is like a movie. Like you watch it, it's not just you can't just like crank through them. They're like very dense. A lot happens.
I can crank through them.
You can get through them, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not just like watching. It's very dense to like watch another one.
Yeah,
like,
they're the kind of shows that like
it shouldn't be taken
you.
lightly.
Yeah. It's a major commitment.
So, like you, I devoured the show just now. Are you excited about season 3? Like, it's hard for me to even imagine like watching it week to week, like waiting a year for the next season.
Yeah, I'm. You know, like having an eye to history. We kind of know what's coming a little bit.
What? Don't spoil it for me. I have these terrible teachers. I don't know what's coming.
One word. Jazz. I mean, it is. It's like, you know, the flappers in America. I don't know like too much about British history in the late 20s and early 30s, but you know, if it's anything like American history, you have the Roaring 20s and then you have the Depression on the way, which I imagine will factor greatly. You know, they're already kind of hitting on it a little bit now with like these old money families having to sell their estates and like, they had that character of the kind of like poor, the like cash poor aristocrat who's like, I've had to sell all my houses.
I think that may have been in the Christmas special.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we'll leave it at that, but that's not that spoiling.
Yeah, and so I think there's going to be a lot of that. You know, like how long will the family be able to, like, will there be anything for Matthew to inherit?
That's interesting.
Come Depression time.
Yeah, I think, again, like Deadwood, which was cut off short, but I think we're going to see, like, a change to by the end, it will be a completely different world than it was in the pilot.
The thing about Deadwood, too, is, like, Deadwood ended when it should have ended. Like, once it becomes part of America and, like, you know, and roads are being paved, it's like, this is just not the same fun show anymore.
Yeah, Deadwood
but Downton Abbey could go, like, through World War II, through the 50s, through like who knows how, like it's just an exciting chunk of time.
I see.
Especially when you have the luxury, as Downton Abbey does, of just jumping ahead a few years of being like, now it's 2 years later and World War II's happening. Isn't that crazy?
It's also, I think, a huge. I mean, like by PBS masterpiece standards, it's such a huge hit. I think they're gonna be the show's gonna be on pretty much as long as Julian Fellows, I think is his name, who created the show. Like, I think it's pretty much gonna be around as long as he wants it to be. So
I would love,
unlike Deadwood, it won't be cut off before the creator.
I would love if it becomes like a really expensive like Coronation Street, like one of those British shows that's been running for like 20 years. You know, if they just condense the time and like, you know, new generations come in and stuff. That'd be fun. I like the setting.
That's cool. I
don't think they'll do that just because it's super expensive.
I kind of want it to have a beginning, middle, and end. Like I want it to have like a cohesive statement.
We know what the end's gonna be. Like,
what's the end gonna be?
I mean, they're losing the house. Like the family. There's no way, like into modern times at least, that like this one family has this massive Abbey mansion house.
I mean, at some point, that house became a film studio where people shot things.
Yeah, at some point, it becomes a museum. Like,
I wonder
just
if
gonna happen.
That should be the finale. Is like, you know, Mary's great grandchildren are living there, and like a show comes in to shoot a fictionalized version, and it just starts eating itself.
Or it's just like the Beckhams buy it. Just David Beckham rolls up and just pays cash for it.
Downton Abbey. Streeter and I like it. Do you think we sold anyone on it with this podcast?
I don't know. I mean,
I doubt
to be honest, if you haven't watched the show, this has been the most boring like podcast. We're just talking about these characters that they don't know.
Yeah.
I would really encourage people to watch it. I mean, PBS is so bully about this show that they called it a masterpiece right out the gate.
I wonder if PBS is like even concerned about piracy. Like, what do they give a shit? They don't have commercials. Do they even care?
I love Hugh Bonneville's the line. I guess what happened is someone was interviewing him and they let slip that they had maybe pirated a little bit of the show.
Right.
And he sounds like the Earl of Grantham. He's kind of chastising this interviewer. And he just goes, "You should be ashamed. Be ashamed." He's like ordering the person to be ashamed of it. But like I said, yeah, we pay for PBS. That's part of our taxes.
I feel like that's the old media from season 1 of Downton Abbey. By the time the show's over, we'll be in a completely different media landscape.
Yeah, I was reading it just kind of laughing. I was like, wow, he is maybe a little like that character. Just be ashamed, sir.
Streeter, is there anything we can plug before we go? CollegeHumor.com.
No, don't plug that. That doesn't need plugging. Oh, plug my site, White Wine.
WhiteWine.com.
Yeah, White Wine with an H.
What is WhiteWine.com?
Often, kind of ties in because like most of the problems on Downton Abbey are massive white wines.
So what is White Wine?
White Wine is a site I started a long time ago where we collect just first world problems, people's Facebook statuses, where they're like complaining about having to wait a long time at the BMW dealership and stuff.
And that's White Wine.
Whitewine.com.
With an H.
With an H. It's a pun.
You get it.
I can't believe that domain was available when I thought of it. I was really excited. So you can go there, and the real fun thing to do on the site is click on the ads. You show up there. It's really fun just to hit the ads, refresh the page, maybe go to a different computer and click the ads too. It's a lot of fun.
That sounds great. Great. Thank you so much for doing this, Streeter.
Thanks for having me. I wish maybe next time I come back you can introduce me as your friend.
You know what? I have a good feeling we will have Streeter back on the show, and I think Pat will be back on the show too. Those guys are two of my best friends. Thanks again for doing the show. It is time for the part everyone has been waiting for, the After the Fact Fact Check. Need a better name for this segment. I would not hate it if people were suggesting better names for this segment to me over Twitter and Facebook. You'll find out how to get in touch with me after I get through all of this. So at one point in this episode, we were unsure if Downstairs Upstairs was a specific show or if it was a subgenre of British drama. The confusion is that it is both. It is a 70s BBC show called Downstairs Upstairs, but The Guardian also described Downton Abbey as, quote, an institution that began its life as an upstairs-downstairs period drama. So I'm going to say yes, it's also a subgenre. The Downton Abbey-ish thing that Abed got into on Community was called Cougarton Abbey, though after reviewing the clips of it on YouTube, it's actually more of a parody of British sitcoms than Downton Abbey, but whatever. The Titanic sunk in 1912. Tom Phillip, our former intern, said that he loves the first season of Downton Abbey but wasn't as crazy about the second, and he also said that the most recent Doctor Who series in retrospect sucked. And hey, that's Tom. He's British. I feel like you gotta respect his opinion on Doctor Who. I hope everything Streeter said about World War I was correct because I'm so thoroughly bored by history I didn't check. If you have a problem, take it up with him. He's at Street Seidel on Twitter. Maggie Smith won 2 Oscars. Best Actress in 1969 for her performance as an unorthodox Scottish schoolteacher in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and Best Supporting Actress for her role as the British actress Diana Barry in The California Suite, acting opposite Michael Caine. I took all those descriptions from Wikipedia. I've never seen or heard of either of those movies, but Maggie Smith has been acting since 1952, and that picture of Sophie McShrey, who plays Daisy on Downton Abbey, was from Look magazine, not Stuff. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you have a suggestion for the name of that segment, I guess, you can hit me up on Twitter. I am at Jeff Rubin Show, on my Facebook fan page, at my blog, jeffrubin.com, on Tumblr. There's comments there. And on youtube.com/JeffRubin, where, against my better judgment, I spend time checking the comments. You can also leave me a review on iTunes. You better believe I'm going to see that motherfucker. Next week on the show, I'm really excited. It's going to be a field episode, like the Quidditch one I did with Casey. This one is at the Toy Fair. The Toy Fair is this huge thing at the Javits Center here in New York. I went with Owen Parsons from College Humor and Dorkley, who is a friend of mine. And it's going to be so much fun. There's so many great interviews in this one episode. We walked around all day. As soon as I stop recording this. I'm going to start editing that, and I can't wait to put it out next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. That'll be out Tuesday. Bye for now.